The Chicago Bulls have officially clinched a play-in spot. So let's talk about it. What is going on, y'all? Faiz Sports All back at it with another video talking some NBA here to talk about the Chicago Bulls and them officially clinching a play-in spot. All right, so let's talk about this, people. So the Bulls right now are the number 10 seed with literally just like, I think, a couple of games left here. And they're pretty much locked into that 10 seed, all right? So that is the last spot of the play-in qualifications, okay? And as I mentioned, they're pretty much locked into that last spot because Atlanta and Toronto are above them at 8 and 9, but they're like 2 games ahead of them. And like I said, there's barely any games left. So for the most part, it is more than a 90% chance that the Bulls end up being the number 10 seed. Now, let me explain to you guys, if you guys are not familiar with how the play-in works, okay? So essentially, the play-in works as follows. The 7 seed and the 8 seed will play each other, and the 9 seed and the 10 seed will play each other, all right? So those two matchups happen, and the outcome is going to be to determine who gets the 7th spot and the 8th spot. The NBA implemented the play-in tournament just because of the fact that they wanted those last 4 spots really, or the last 2 spots for the playoffs, 7 and 8, to be a little bit more competitive. Teams would miss that playoff spot by literally just a game, and so they wanted to make it more interesting. So here's how it's going to go. Miami's going to play Atlanta, okay, and since Miami's the higher seed, they're the 7th seed, they will only have to beat Atlanta once. It is basically double elimination, essentially how it works. Atlanta has to beat Miami twice since they're a lower seed in order to advance. So Miami only has to beat them once. Atlanta only has to beat them twice. Same thing with Toronto, Chicago. The Bulls have to beat the Raptors twice. The Raptors only have to beat us once. Now, let's say that Miami beats Atlanta once and they win that series, if you will, whatever you want to call that, game series, etc. And then let's say the Bulls are able to beat the Raptors in 2 games, and they go ahead and they advance. Well, at this time, the loser of the Miami-Atlanta series would then play the Bulls for the 8th seed. All right? So Miami won against Atlanta. They're already the 7th seed. They're locked in. Now the 8th seed is up for grabs. So Atlanta would have to play Chicago, and Chicago would then again have to beat Atlanta twice to get the 8th spot. Basically, the Bulls are going to have to win 4 games to get to the 8th seed in order to get a date with potentially the Milwaukee Bucks. Yes, that's right. All of that hard work, and you get a matchup in the first round against the Milwaukee Bucks. In all seriousness, folks, before I started recording this video, I really always usually write down kind of the notes I have on what I want to talk about. But this one, I really didn't know where to go with this because, look, you always want your team to be competitive, but at the same time, what is the point here? Even when the whole Pat Bev acquisition happened, I told you guys, right, I wasn't a big fan, but then again, Pat Bev ended up having a pretty good impact, and the Bulls were able to propel themselves into the play-in. Could they beat Toronto? Maybe. Could they beat Atlanta? Maybe. Like, none of these teams are world beaters here. The Bulls have been playing excellent as of late. Their defense has really stepped up, so they could definitely beat them. But what's the ceiling here? The ceiling is you're getting a first-round date with the Bucks if you win these 4 games, and you're getting swept or you're losing in a gentleman's sweep in 5 games. Let's be honest here. We're not beating the Milwaukee Bucks, and that was really the whole point I was making this past offseason when it really looked like the Bulls were running it back. And I said, look, if you were going to run it back, you need to add more pieces. And they didn't add anybody. They added like Andre Drummond, like a Goran Dragic, who's no longer with the team. Like, they added very ancillary pieces. They did not add anyone significant. And AK and Emmy should know that this was going to be the outcome. I don't know what they thought was going to be the case. I know everyone wants to go ahead and, point right away to the Lonzo Ball injury, but folks, even with Lonzo Ball, you're not beating the Milwaukee Bucks. So it's like, what is the ceiling here? And you had an opportunity, the Bulls did, to trade away Vooch and or DeMar at the deadline and potentially look to get either younger or get more impactful players. They didn't do that either. So this is the ceiling here. And again, it's fun. for fans, because we get to watch more Bulls basketball and we get to potentially see a playoff series, and maybe there's a non-zero chance, somehow, some way, maybe, somebody on the Bucks gets hurt, Giannis, and we beat them. But point being is, it's not going to happen, right? It's very unrealistic, and we are going to get not upset. We're going to lose in the first round. And then we're going to have to go back to the drawing board here, people. So I just feel like we delayed this, and now the reality is going to set in for AK and Emmy. Like, what are we going to do with this roster? I'm not saying this roster is bad. I'm just saying it's not good enough, right? Zach LaVine has really stepped it up, and he looks like the all-star level, max level player that we paid him. That's cool. Zach can be a piece. You take a look at the other guys, P. Will, Io. Do you feel like they've made enough development and strides to really keep them around? Kobe's made strides. He's really stepped up his game. You got Vooch and DeMar, who really, they are who they are. So, AK has to really sit back and really observe and say, look, would it have been better for us to tank this year, potentially have a chance at getting a guy like a Victor Wembanyama, who's going to be potentially a generational player? So they're just delaying the inevitable here. Either a rebuild has to come, or we got to go ahead and trade and sign players somehow in free agency where they come to Chicago, and again, boom, we're a title contender that way. There's only two ways to improve your people: the draft or free agency. Most likely the Bulls have to take the draft route, and they delayed it. And now that's what's going to happen here. So again, I don't mean to be pessimistic here, but that's what's really going to happen here. We're going to have a date with the Milwaukee Bucks if we get past the play-in tournament, and then we will probably lose in 4 or 5 games. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below as always. Thanks for watching.